The Denver Broncos stunned the playoff-bound Los Angeles Chargers in their home finale 31-28.
Oh no. Anyway.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, many of you might be wondering, Director, what are you smiling for? We lost that game on Sunday. There was things that went down in that game in terms of decisions made by the coaching staff that makes us want to pull our hair out. Mike Williams went down with injury. Things are not looking as good as we had hoped going into the postseason. I'm here to tell you all of that is background noise, okay? We've got some news on Mike Williams that we want to break in this video. And yes, we're going to be going over the big decision by Brandon Staley in terms of putting the starters out there rather aggressively, which maybe in the end wasn't the right call. The reason I say all of that is background noise because despite all of that, even before the game even kicked off, the Chargers had firmly put their grip on the 5th seed of the NFL playoffs, and we're going into the tournament regardless of everything that went down, and that is something that requires our attention as a fan base. That is something that deserves our optimism as a fan base and support as a fan base, and we're going to get into all of the nitty-gritty in terms of what the Chargers fans should be expecting, maybe going over the decision-making a little bit of this Week 18 game, but ultimately what we should be focused on going into the wild card versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville coming up on Saturday. So a lot to go over in this one, guys. Before we do, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I've gotten myself a head start on this weekend, man. If you guys want to go through and start scrolling through some of the players we're going to see in the wild card, please feel free to do so. My first entry, though, had to be in support of the Chargers. And honestly, there is some data supporting all of these decisions in terms of the Chargers secondary and even the offense, which has seen an uptick. If you guys want to get in on the action, use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Before we do kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this one. Lights, camera, action. A major Brandon Staley mistake, as well as an update on Mike Williams. This is going to be your playoff prep video going into Saturday. Of course, we're going to be covering a little bit more along the way, but before we get into all of that, I did want to highlight this moment that happened just before kickoff. Russell Wilson, Derwin James, both sporting the number 3, similar to Damar Hamlin, took the field and knelt in unison in support of Damar Hamlin in that situation that went down last week with the Bengals and, of course, the Buffalo Bills. This is one of those moments that you don't get to see very often in football, and one that certainly, got some brownie points, at least from me, for Russell Wilson in the support of what these guys were performing this for. So definitely one of those moments that I did not want to scoot on by or shuffle under the carpet. This was certainly one of those things that I needed to highlight as a gem, certainly, in that situation with Damar. And as of right now, what we're hearing from Damar is that things are looking good. I'm not quite sure if I read that right, but it seems like that he was on his way to another hospital, maybe even home. But again, you guys can confirm that for yourselves. Hopefully he does right in terms of his recovery, and this was a great moment that we wanted to highlight in this video. So let's get into the nitty-gritty with it, man. Out with the great news and in with maybe not so great news, the elephant in the room. And honestly, I was going to maybe save the segment for last, but this is definitely at the forefront of a lot of Chargers minds right now. Going into the postseason, that game was particularly important in terms of player health. We wanted to get in, get out, and start focusing on the Jacksonville Jaguars, as certainly we didn't need to win that game. That game had zero consequence in terms of the Chargers seeding in the playoffs. So why did not the Chargers rest their guys, protect that going into the postseason? So before going off into any of that, prayers to Mike Williams, who was carted off to the locker room in the second quarter. Now, to be clear, Mike Williams was able to stand under his own power. He fell to his knees while going to the sideline, went into the blue tent, and ultimately was carted into the locker room. And honestly, if I'm being truthful with you Chargers fans, in the moment, it didn't look good. He was wincing in pain. They were working on his back in that tent. Then ultimately, they did show a shot of him being wheeled into the locker room, where he did seem to be grimacing in a lot of pain. And in that moment, I was sick to my stomach. I'm sure many Chargers fans were there with me, man. It was just one of those things things that could not happen in this game. Later, that injury was described as back spasms on social media after the game. And at that point, I was starting to feel maybe a little bit more optimism in terms of his return. Because right now, actually in the building, there's a lot of optimism that he'll be returning to the Jaguars, okay? But, or to play versus the Jaguars. But we can't say for certain because Mike Williams does have a history with back injuries. As a matter of fact, breaking news, just before going on to record this video, news broke of Williams' status in terms of that injury. His MRI was performed this morning, and it seems that there is no fracture in his back. That would have been the one thing that certainly holds him out from playing this week and maybe many weeks to come. What this was described as was a contusion, okay? So in layman's terms, he's got a bruise on his back, all right? And Staley says he should be practicing this week and should be ready to play versus the Jaguars. This is coming in via Daniel Popper. Okay, this is certainly great news. Fantastic news. The Chargers dodged a Brandon Staley-sized bullet with this news that came in this morning. Honestly, this is one that Chargers fans should certainly start celebrating because we're going to need Mike Williams. Now, that doesn't mean that Mike Williams is certainly going to play, and it doesn't mean that he's going to be playing 100% of snaps when it comes to the wild card game. If it were me, okay, because we don't have any official information on that. If it were me, and as much as it pains me to say it, if I'm going into this Mike Williams situation, and if he's still experiencing any discomfort by next week, my opinion would be to either rest him or give him limited snaps. Because honestly, we need to give him a shot at possibly playing the Chiefs in better health. We're going to need him. We're going to need him more than ever if the Chargers are to survive the Jags and hopefully go face the Kansas City Chiefs, because I know, again, it's risky not going in with your best players in the wild card, because if you can't win that game, you're not even going to give yourselves a chance at facing the Chiefs. But if the Chargers do, in fact, survive the Jags, we're going to need Mike Williams more than ever. He's always been our secret weapon versus the Chiefs, and that's something certainly to take into account at least. So I would say, if I were predicting anything, if Mike Williams is okay, I would expect him to play on Saturday, even if it is in a limited fashion. But you want to give him as good a shot as anybody to get healthy for the following week, if that does happen, versus Kansas City. Now, we need to talk a little bit about that decision as a whole, because this is certainly one that's been criticized by Chargers fans, myself included. Now, the injury does suck, and it left a lot of Chargers fans feeling deflated after the game. I don't know if many of us were upset about the results of the game. Of course, a lot of us want to win. We want to take down the Broncos no matter what. But I think we were more deflated in terms of what happened, because in the end, it was entirely avoidable. At one point, man, I would actually say a big point that I made in the preview video, it was going to be protecting Mike and Keenan throughout this game, because they have been banged up all season. They've shown history this season that they are maybe a little bit riskier in terms of injury. And this was an easy enough task to accomplish, in my opinion. The other wide receivers on this roster, Palmer, Carter, Bandy, these guys are battle tested. We know that they can handle the workload. We've seen it. There was many weeks where we didn't have, Mike Williams or Keenan Allen. Those guys went out there and killed it. They still gave Justin Herbert solid options to go out there and try and grab a win. But instead, even before kickoff, we saw that Michael Bandy was listed as inactive. And the game plan of rolling out Keenan and Mike Williams for the majority of the game, that was kind of set in motion. And that was pretty sketchy, in my opinion. Staley later explained that we only had so many players to work with, right? I think in a presser he was explaining, well, you got 48 guys to choose from. You've got to field a team. In the end, you got to do what you got to do. And he also explained that they were only allowed to elevate 2 players to the active roster from the practice squad. I didn't know that. Apparently that is something. You can only bring up 2 players at a time. But in my opinion, we did have guys on the 53 that already solved the issue, right? We rolled out on Sunday with only 4 active wide receivers. One of those decisions being made in listing Michael Bandy as inactive. I didn't quite like that. That was a huge red flag for me even going into this game, saying, oh, we only have 4 wide receivers active. These guys are going to have to play. And the Chargers, they experienced the consequences of that decision to the full degree, at least at the moment. All of us were thinking, oh, man, Mike is probably not going to play for the rest of the playoffs. That sucks. Mike does go down. And Staley, who was just winning the trust of the Chargers fans, all of a sudden finds his judgment in question yet again. Why did we do this? Why did we roll out with Mike Williams? It seems like the most obvious decision to protect your players in a game that ultimately does not matter. To me, I felt the Chargers should have rostered, or they should have made their actives and inactives just a little bit different. Roster one less tight end, because yes, I do think they started 4. Maybe you go ahead and list Stone Smart as inactive to make space for Michael Bandy. Then, in real-time football, you roll out with Palmer, Carter, and Bandy and just kind of hope for the best, right? Even if you're starting, Justin Herbert for a handful of snaps, you still have 3 pretty talented wide receivers that can handle the load. On that terms, I would only field Mike and maybe Keenan in a limited role when absolutely necessary, and also to kind of keep some reps under their belt, stay in shape for the playoffs. That was kind of what I was hoping for, right? You start Palmer, Carter, Bandy, kind of hope for the best, and maybe sprinkle in a little bit of Mike and Keenan when necessary. And this is without a doubt, in terms of the decision, I would say a strike against our head coach, who has made a slew of questionable decisions regarding the personnel this season. We have to acknowledge this. We do have to acknowledge this. We know going into this game that no matter what, the 5th seed was safe, and it was a prime opportunity to protect your players, and that didn't happen. Either way, I'll say it's unfortunate. And we can all hope that this isn't a long-term injury for Mike Williams. As of right now and this morning, it seems like it's okay. Now, despite the gross feeling of suffering an ultimately avoidable setback, we need to put this, again, in our rearview mirror for now. Because there's a playoff game staring us in the face, and even if we're dissatisfied with the handling of Week 18 by Brandon Staley, they need the support of the Chargers fans for the wild card. So I'll invite all Chargers fans to exercise something that I preach every season. When something like this definitely happens, be mad today, bolt up tomorrow, because what's done is done. And we can only hope that the team learns from this experience going forward and that Mike Williams and the starters are okay. It really is a massive game coming this Saturday. We need to be sure that our attention is focused in the appropriate areas. Now, this next segment, momentum versus the win. Now, I do need to compliment some of the good decisions I saw on Sunday via the personnel, because we did see some good ones. I think there's several players that played longer than I would have liked. I would have made a different decision in terms of the length of time they're out there on the field. But in the end, we did pull several guys to the sideline, foregoing the win to protect the players. That decision was indeed made. Herbert, Bosa, Mack, Derwin, among many others, saw ample playing time, but were ultimately benched for backups. This is what we wanted to see, even if the timeline didn't match what we were hoping to see on the field. And again, I felt many, if not all of them, were out there too long. But I also felt it was important to get them at least some exposure this week to keep their feet under them, right? Keep that rhythm, that momentum. Bosa in particular needed reps this week. This is his, second game back in a limited fashion. He's got to try and get back into game shape. But beyond that, you do want your quarterback to feel in rhythm going into the postseason. So with some momentum in mind, I think these reps were important, even if there were definitely way too many of them. I think that point was way more important than fighting for the win. Sure, nobody likes losing to the Broncos, no matter the circumstances. But what's more important is the majority of this team made it out. Okay, sure, Williams and Kenneth Murray's, those situations leave room for doubt, but ultimately it seems we made it out alive, mostly healthy. And Mike Williams is trending in the right direction. So let's take the small victories while we have them. Don't let it distract you too much from the fact that the Chargers are indeed going to the postseason, and this would be the biggest game of the past 4 seasons for the Bolts. We've got to try and shift our focus over to that. This next segment's called Vanilla Ice Cream, all right? Now, this next segment highlights something that I appreciated from the coaching staff this week. Because, again, we did see a lot of good stuff. Despite, the highlighted, decision by Brandon Staley, there were some really good things that we saw versus the Broncos. In terms of strategy, I felt the play calling was on point. Some of you guys might be like, well, director, it seemed like it wasn't. The defense wasn't performing. As we've seen the last 4 weeks, the offense was kind of on and off. What are you talking about? Well, everything that I saw on Sunday was vanilla as the days are long, with a flurry of basic deep shots tossed in. And this was a classic display of keeping your cards close to the vest. And in a way, this satisfied my hopes for testing the waters in terms of the offense while also playing it safe. We allowed Herbert to throw deep, a lot, while not overcomplicating things. And sometimes, when you've got a talent like Justin Herbert, the simple things are oftentimes what brings the most success. And what I mean by that is that Herbert has a special ability to turn a basic play into a spectacular moment in any given game. And what was a simple go route or post is turned into a big play with an unbelievable ball placement by Justin Herbert. This is something that you see with a lot of players like Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. Justin Herbert has that too. And in the end, it does feel like the Chargers were saving the best for last in terms of going into the playoffs. They didn't want to give too much away. That's really a character trait of the Chargers if you've watched them for a long time. And there's going to be a very, limited tape on, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack together for the Jacksonville Jaguars to lean on and work with. There's going to be limited looks at the Chargers' offensive game plan going into this one. Certainly if, a later development that we're going to talk about here in a minute comes to fruition, there's a flurry of uncertainty for the Jags and what the Chargers are bringing to Jacksonville, and that is the way we want it. Hold your cards close to the vest. Don't give away too much. Save your best for last, and just kind of go out there and go through the motions when it comes to Week 18. I also kind of wanted to give a shout-out to Donald Parham in this game, who kind of played in relief of Mike Williams. Did anybody else notice this? Donald Parham kind of stepped in as that big target, right? That spectacular grab kind of target. And I think he was electric out there. So props to Donald Parham. Hopefully he gets more involved in terms of the postseason as well. He looked fantastic. Finally, I did want to go over another bit of news that Chargers fans might be eagerly awaiting to hear more about. It's going to be in this segment. See you Slater. See you Slater. Now, it seems that there is finally some news on Rashawn Slater to discuss. Finally. It's not much, but it seems to be going in the right direction. Something for Chargers fans to get excited about. It seems that Rashawn Slater has been training aggressively to get back on the field. And right now, all we have to work with is that he's making progress. Now, if you're the Chargers organization, you're not known for announcing anything like this too early, right? All of us Chargers fans can say that. If something big happens, it kind of, comes out of nowhere. So all I'll say to Chargers fans is that it feels kind of like there's a 50-50 shot we see Slater out there on Saturday. Isn't that exciting? 50-50 is certainly way more than any of us expected when Rashawn Slater first went down. On one hand, the team may decide to play it safe, right? If they feel like there's any large chance of re-injury, I can't imagine that they would activate him. But on the other hand, if he really looks ready to go, it opens up this playbook immensely. I really can't describe how much of an impact that he would make. It would be huge. A set and forget left tackle does wonders for your offense. It would look maybe a little bit reminiscent of last year's, which was definitely a successful look for the Chargers. If anything, I feel like we're going to know more by tomorrow as the game's being played on Saturday, maybe by Wednesday, right? Because the Chargers would definitely need to activate him ahead of time. And if we do see news like that, wow, this channel's going to explode in terms of its hype. So keep your eyes peeled, because a Slater return could be the difference between a passable offense or an elite offense. It really is that big of a deal. So to close out this video, first off, GG's to the Broncos. We don't like losing to them, but whatever. I think the Chargers did what they needed to do. They got out and they're ready to face the Jags. In the end, I wanted to emphasize a big point in this video, okay? Because I think the whole Staley situation is definitely the most talked about thing when it comes to Week 18. I wanted to emphasize that it's okay to criticize his decision while also supporting Brandon Staley at the same time, all right? It wasn't the right call, in my opinion. It was not the right call. But we've got such a massive game ahead of us. We need to allow ourselves to be upset, right? Just for a moment, so we can move on to the biggest game of the last 4 seasons for the Chargers. The Jags are coming, and we got to be ready. And ultimately, we got extremely lucky in terms of health. It could have been a lot worse. And we've got a chance to add a massive difference maker like Rashawn Slater along the way. So at this point, I mean, we've been talking about the luck for the Chargers. As unlucky as what happened was, we got very lucky in the result of that. And we're continuing to get lucky with the even chance of seeing Rashawn Slater back. So at this point, it's impossible to talk about the postseason without mentioning the dark horse Chargers. Genuinely. This team is hit a stride. Sure, we lost a meaningless game on Sunday, but we made it out the other side with the 5th seed and a mostly healthy roster. And if the previous 4 weeks have been any indication, this team is on the rise. The defense is playing lights out. The offense is finding their footing behind Justin Herbert. Anything can happen. What I'm about to say, I do say genuinely, okay? This season provides as good a shot as any for the Chargers to make it to the big game. It really does. We were all screaming this from the mountaintops when we charged into the season with one of the most filthy rosters I've ever seen for the Bolts. I think it's happening. It's coming. Because at this moment in time, just about everybody is back. I understand there were so many injuries, so much doubt, but that roster that we were all super excited about for the most part, it's there. It's here. It's ready to go. And the timing could not be more perfect. At a time where we need them the most, this roster has assembled. It's time, Bolt fam. A massive boost in play calling also followed suit in terms of the returning players. It's time to throw down with everything you got if you're a Chargers fan and support your Los Angeles Chargers. Because whether or not you're a super hyped fan like me or a cautiously optimistic fan like others, the fact of the matter is, the hard, cold fact is, no matter what, the Chargers are firmly in the mix. And from here on out, anything can happen. Together we bleed powder blue, and if there was ever a time to be an outspoken, eccentric fan base, it is now. The Chargers, whatever the odds may be, have a shot at the Super Bowl. Let's do this, Bolt fam. Let's do this. It is time to throw down as a Bolt fam, as a fan base, in support of your Los Angeles Chargers, and scream to the mountaintops that we are as excited as anybody to hope our team makes it to the postseason, or I should say to the Super Bowl at this point. We got the Jags this week. If we survive that game, we got the Chiefs the week after. The Chiefs, in my opinion, as dominant as they have been, the Chargers will always have a shot versus them. And then from there on, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Get excited, Bolt fam. Get excited. Be mad today, Bolt up tomorrow when it comes to the Brandon Staley decision. I think in the end, we all need to offer our support for our head coach, try and move on from our displeasure with that decision, and put our focus firmly on the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up this Saturday in the wild card. Well, with that, guys, if you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. Get excited, Bolt fam. The first playoff appearance for the Chargers since 2018, and we got a loaded roster going in. Appreciate you guys so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. The Chargers, a dark horse Super Bowl contender, has a ring to it.